Yesterday afternoon, I had a meeting with Jimmy, the tree guy, and it took a while to set it up. I'm sure in the meantime I could have gotten some other, perhaps more commercially established tree service to come out, but Jimmy knows my trees. He's been working on this property that we occupy since it was my father-in-law's. And I had some specific things that I wanted taken care of, some piles of brush that I had collected from things that came down during the heavy snow last winter, and one very large limb on a grand old madrone tree that had been brought down in that same storm that needed to be sawn up and the stub of it removed up where it comes out from the main trunk. But while he was there, he and I walked around the whole place and I shared with him some of my thoughts about work that might need to be done in the near or the long term. And he gave me his feedback. And at one point we were looking at this particularly majestic old oak, black oak, that lies just between the house and the TID ditch that seems to be stressed. There's a fair amount of dieback of the ends of some of the outer limbs, and Jimmy had just been up in that tree a couple of years ago cleaning out that kind of stuff and was surprised to see how much more there was. And so we were talking about, what this tree might need. And I pointed out that it was getting sprayed on by a couple of lawn sprinklers, and that I'd been wondering if it might do better if we capped one of those. And he thought that was probably a good idea and suggested maybe I could clear all the vegetation around the base of it and mulch it to keep it dry. Anyway, and then he said, but you could do that and you might not see any results for a couple of years, and even then you wouldn't necessarily know whether what you'd done was what made the difference, because, these things operate on a different time scale from ours. And that really struck me. Struck me that Jimmy, through his love of trees, through his intimate acquaintance with trees, his study of trees, had learned something from the trees. That his own sense of the passage of time had been deepened and enriched through dialogue with trees. And this passage from the book of Proverbs today invites us into that kind of dialogue with God's creation. The kind of dialogue that geologists have with the landforms surrounding a place like Ashland. The kind of dialogue that cosmologists have with the origins and the evolution and the destiny of the universe. A kind of sympathetic engagement with God's creation that awakens our imagination to scales of time and of space, richness of being that we would not be able to know on our own. And that is one of the amazing things about us as human beings, that we have this capacity to imaginatively enter into the life of other creatures, not only other people, but trees and mountains and stars and galaxies, and recognize there a pattern and a meaning that derives from God. So, wisdom, Lady Wisdom, this feminine personification of God that the book of Proverbs speaks of, who never was entirely absolute and transcendent and a solitary oneness, but existed from the beginning in relationship and was there with God in the creation of all things, and yet who calls to us as human beings, who stands at the crossroads or at the gates of the city and calls out to human beings saying, "Learn from me. Learn understanding. Learn wisdom. Come and feast at the banquet of wisdom that God has prepared for you." This figure of Lady Wisdom informs the imagination of the author of the Gospel of John, who right at the beginning of the prologue to the Gospel writes of the Word that was in the beginning with God, that was God, through whom God created all things, without whom not one thing that was created came into being. The Word that became flesh in Jesus of Nazareth, full of grace and truth. It is this wisdom Christ who invites us into the very life of God through the gift of the Holy Spirit that we hear about in our reading from the 14th chapter of John today. A Spirit who reveals to us the things that we are not ready for now, but will be ready for later. The spirit of a wisdom that is always deepening, always growing, always learning, always enriching our share in what God is creating. From the beginning, here and now, all the way to the end. So what does this mean for us as people who bear the name of the Holy Trinity, of a God who invites us through the Holy Spirit into this relationship of wisdom with God, the wisdom of Christ, who was able to receive from God everything that God has. All the depths of love and of knowledge and of grace and of truth, not for himself, but so that through the gift of the Spirit, those very same gifts might come and become ours. That the Spirit might reveal to us in time, at the right time, through the ongoing and unfolding revelation of God's wisdom, we might learn from Christ the very inner workings of God in creation. What does this mean for us, we people of the Holy Trinity? What kind of life does it invite us to? Well, for one thing, a creative life. One where we are drawn, called by wisdom to find the truth through our own creative working, through our own deeds of service and compassion to the world, through our making labyrinths and quilts and music and poetry and art, through our creative dialogue with people different from ourselves, through the creative aspect of our life of prayer. That is not simply the, conservation and repetition of tradition, but is through that tradition always opening up to what the Spirit has to reveal to us today that is new. It also means that we live with a sense of humility about our own understanding. That, yes, we have received tremendous gifts of knowledge and revelation and grace and wisdom and healing, and yet these things are always partial. Always just a foretaste of what the Spirit is continually revealing to us in the ongoing creative unfoldment of God. And nothing that we encounter, be it scientific discoveries, be it our own psychological processes, the mystery of our own personalities in their complexity and their depth. Be they the encounter with cultures and religions and ways of wisdom that might seem on the face of them to be different from ours and strange and impenetrable, are actually gifts to us from God's wisdom, inviting us to rejoice in the diversity of the inhabited world, to delight in the complexity of human beings and the human race. That we don't need to withdraw fearfully into our little tribal groups and maintain the superiority of our revelations or our civilizations or our ways of knowing, but that we are continually called to open our imagination to discover more of the richness, of the complexity, of the diversity, and the beauty of God. And this openness comes to meet us even in our sufferings, even in our struggles, even in our perplexity, in our mortality, our limitations, our misunderstandings, our failures, our ignorance, the ways that knowingly and unknowingly we hurt one another and are hurt. Because as Paul says in his letter to the Romans, even our sufferings are given to us that we might grow in wisdom, that we might gain through them the power of endurance. And not just an endurance that kind of grits our teeth and gets through it the best we're able, but an endurance through which we acquire real substance. We become people of character, like an oak tree, gnarled by the winter winds, with a broken limb here and a dead branch there and a twisted stem over here. Real people of real character who nonetheless, through the love of God that the Spirit continually pours into our hearts, have hope. Hope to learn, hope to grow, hope to become deeper and wiser, hope for the world, that we might wake from our insane dreams of domination and control and perfection to the splendor of what really is, of what God is continually creating. In wisdom and truth and love.